So before giving the floor to our speakers, please allow me to briefly introduce them to you. Julie Hank has been teaching at John Abbott College since 2014, and her background includes a BSc in Behavioral Neuroscience from Concordia and a PhD in Neurological Sciences from the Montreal Neurological Institute at McGill. Her passion for understanding the brain is only surmounted by her love of teaching. Julie Cahouette is also a PhD, and she's both a psychology professor at John Abbott and an adjunct research professor at Carleton University. And that dual role has enabled her to remain an active researcher, but also develop an affinity with young people as a college teacher. This webinar will explain how Julie and Julie have adapted the growth mindset intervention developed by Carol Dweck. They've adapted this intervention to the CEGEP population, and they've made it specific to the context of John Abbott College. In this workshop, their aim is to inspire and guide you to adapt it to your CEGEP context. So I will hand the floor to Julie and Julie. Have a good webinar, everybody.
Thank you, Andy. Julie is starting up the slides as we speak. We're good. Welcome, everybody. So as Andy was saying, the presentation is going to be about 45 minutes, and then we'll take questions after. So in this webinar, we will achieve 3 things. So first, we'll explain what a growth mindset is. Then we'll tell you about a growth mindset intervention that we did at John Abbott. And then based on that, we're going to give you some concrete ideas how to adapt it to your own CEGEP population.
So we're going to begin by really describing what a mindset is before even talking about growth versus fixed. So a mindset is an implicit theory. So it's implicit, it's often unconscious, and we develop it about our own nature, the social world, and it really allows us to help understand the world. Our mindset other hand is the belief about our learning that we can change, that we can adapt, that through the right strategies and effort, we can get better, stronger, smarter. And so she identified and contrasted these 2 mindsets and looked at how adopting one of these mindsets can influence our learning. And so these implicit theories really act as a filter, influencing our perception of ourselves, others, and our social world. And so, for example, when we think about what does a student think about their learning, often there's this idea about ease. If it comes naturally to me, if it's easy for me, I'm good at this. But if I am struggling in an area and I'm making mistakes, this means that I'm not good at it. And so this is our understanding of how learning should be. And this is often a fixed idea, right? The growth mindset is the idea that, well, even if I'm struggling, I can apply the right technique, and with a lot of practice, I can get better and I get stronger and smarter in any subject. So the meaning that we create for regarding our learning can have a really important impact on a student's emotional kind of makeup, the way that they think, their anxiety, and their behavior. So here we can just contrast the 2. So a person with a fixed mindset is a belief that intelligence is static. So often I'll speak to my students and ask them, well, do you think you have a fixed or growth mindset? And in this slide, you could identify behaviors that may mean that you have a fixed or growth mindset. So a student with a fixed mindset or a person with a fixed mindset is really going to avoid difficulties. They'll give up easily. So often you'll talk about when you're trying to implement a growth mindset, we could talk about creating grit and resilience in the classroom. But if you have a fixed mindset, you're avoiding these challenges. You see effort as futile. What's the point of putting effort in this? I'm not good at it. You ignore criticism. Actually, you could find it very off-putting to receive any type of evaluation or criticism. and you may feel threatened by the success of others. As a result, a student with a fixed mindset may not reach their full potential. On the other hand, a growth mindset, a student who adopts a growth mindset, they're looking for the challenge. They're choosing the more difficult options. They're persevering in the face of setbacks. They also see effort as something necessary for success. They are, maybe no one really welcomes criticism, but they're not as threatened by it. They find the success of others very inspiring as well. It almost provides, a way to obtain success for themselves as well. So as a result, students with a growth mindset, they're likely to achieve higher levels of success. But the mindset, when we talk about it and contrast fixed versus growth, is also a very fixed way of looking at mindsets. The newer research on mindset prefers to look at it as a continuum, where we have, on one side fixed, on another side growth, and that we can have a growth mindset in one area and a fixed in another. And then we have also pushes and nudges that could bring us closer to a growth mindset, or we can have triggers that bring us closer to a fixed mindset. And so when we're talking later on in the webinar about how to adopt a growth mindset in the classroom, it's important to talk about these nudges that we could provide our students to go closer to the growth, and to be mindful of those triggers for fixed. Some of those triggers could be failures. So students who just failed their assignment or test, they may be, even if generally speaking they have a growth mindset, this may trigger them to feel that, I just can't get this. Anytime they're going to be in an evaluation scenario, they may go closer to fixed as well. And so we'll talk about more of those triggers later on in the presentation.
So Julie just mentioned nudges to help our student or bring our students closer to our growth mindset. So this is why in this webinar, we're going to talk to you about an intervention that you can actually do with your students, not only to nudge them to get closer to their growth mindset, but it's really a full-on, there's 2 times growth mindset intervention, where what we did is we had a module on Moodle. So there was like 2 lessons, so 2 self-paced module where we got a student to try to integrate a growth mindset. So we didn't only just do an intervention module, but we also tested it. So basically in the next few slides, now what I want to do is I want to show you some of the results of the interventional study that we did. So basically we borrowed from Dweck and other colleagues. We used their material to create this intervention, and we tested it through an experimental design. So basically we wanted to test the effectiveness of this intervention with our own students, because in the past this intervention has been mainly tested with American students, primary level, high school level. So this is why we thought it was really important that we would test how our own adaptation of this material would work with our own students. So in terms of the interventional study, the main strength is, yes, it's experimental. So we can make causal inferences. Also, the other strength is that it's a longitudinal study. So basically what we did is students were recruited to participate at the beginning of the semester. So RO, our registrar office, sent invitation to students that we have identified as being in classes that are, I think, perceived by many students as being challenging. So QM, macroeconomics, math classes. So they got the invitation. So at time 1, they completed a bunch of social demographic questions. And then time 2, time 3 is where the information was given online. The limitation, though, of this is that, as I pointed out, students were recruited. So students were able to decide to participate or not. So obviously this is a self-selection bias. So because students voluntarily decided to participate or not, that means as the study went on, this attrition. So every time point, we lost a few students, and you'll see later on we can talk about why some students decided not to continue on with the intervention. So let's look at some results Very exciting. So don't worry about the slides. It looks really busy, but I just wanted you to see what the students saw in terms of the consent form. And you can clearly see here the 3 time points. So at the beginning of the semester, they fill out some questions, some social demographics, and also school-related question and a scale of growth mindset belief, which I will present you some results. Then you see time 2, time 3. Time 2 is still kind of early in the semester because obviously you want this intervention to be absorbed by students so they could apply it during the semester to those difficult classes they are taking. And then the 3rd time point, step 3, is kind of mid-semester. So we just want to reactivate that knowledge, because just expecting that a 20-minute intervention will change the rest of your life might be a bit too optimistic. So that's why there was a reminder. So what I want to show you first is, I know you're probably very eager to know what is the content of that intervention, but Julie will show it to you later. But at this point, I just want you to see some results about time 1. So before the intervention was given to students. So they fill out the scale, and you can look at the items in front of you. You could even answer those items for yourself. So basically, this is a validated scale of growth mindset. It's self-reported, so what people think about themselves. And that's an important thing to mention. So the growth mindset are your own subjective beliefs, right? So we're not saying that, well, actually, we're kind of saying that growth is better, but basically it's just a subjective interpretation that you have about your own beliefs and your own capability. So in this context, as you see, the questions were framed in terms of intelligence. Like Julie mentioned earlier, with the continuum, we can have growth and fixed belief about different areas of our life. So this scale is specifically for school related. So participants responded on a 6-point Likert scale. Please be careful with the anchor. You see it go from 1, strongly agree, to 6, strongly disagree. Sometimes it's the opposite. So just so that you know how to interpret the results later on. So there's 3 items. So students were asked to answer those with the scale. So you have a certain amount of intelligence, and you can really do much to change it. Second item, your intelligence is something about you that you can't change very much. And 3, you can learn new things, but you can't really change your basic intelligence. So students put their answer to those 3 items, and basically what you do is you add them up to create a composite score. So one score that will identify where you are on this continuum from more fixed to more growth in terms of your perception of your intelligence. So low scores represent a fixed mindset, and a high score represent a growth mindset. So on the next slide, what you're going to see is the results of our students. So those students that participated in our study. So this was in winter 2024. As you see, there's 504 students who participated. Remember, these are students who are registered in QM, macro, and math classes. So again, you see here the continuum. So basically what I did is I did a bar graph. Those QM teachers probably look at this, and this is what we'd like our students to do a nice bar graph. So as you can see here, the majority of our students, good news, seems to hold more growthy beliefs or growth mindset. And about 30% of our students, at least at time 1, their scores were more on the fixed mindset side. So a minority of them, 30%. Looking at this, you might think, the intervention is only really relevant for a minority of students, but this is why I put a little circle. I say, hold on a minute. So yes, those students who have a fixed mindset are probably more likely to benefit from this intervention because we want to get them on the growth side. But if you look at the students, our students at John Abbott in that study that have a growth mindset, well, there's not actually a majority of them that have a strong growth mindset. As you see here, it's about only 10% that are really at the end of the continuum with really, really strong growth beliefs. So basically looking at this, that means there's a lot of room there to move students towards, a more growth mindset. Next slide. Also, just quickly wanted to show you some correlations so that it's going to help you or illustrate to you what growth mindset beliefs are tied with or what they go hand in hand with. So we have some other items here. Remember, it's still at time 1, so before they got the intervention. So there's different school related questions. So all of those are significant. So those correlations are between higher score and growth belief. So if you are high in believing that you have a growth mindset or growth mindset related belief, then it's all correlated with those items. So when you really try hard in a subject in school, it means you can't be good at that subject. So that's inversely correlated significantly. One of my main goals for the rest of the school year is to avoid looking dumb in my classes, inversely correlated significantly. I don't really care about the kind of grades I get for the rest of the school year. I just want to avoid failing too many classes, again, inversely correlated significantly. And the last two ones are positively correlated significantly as well. I like going to school and I feel engaged when I go to school.
Okay, so in this, I'm about to introduce you to the growth mindset intervention that we implemented at John Abbott. But it's really important that we highlight that we based our intervention off of a golden standard of Jaeger and Carol Dweck's work. And what they've shown is that in order for the mindset to be effective, it needs to be accompanied by teacher participation and also this understanding that the students' peers are also engaging with a growth mindset. This is a study that was published in Nature that really provides all of the important criteria to incorporate into your intervention. Because sometimes the literature on growth mindset can be, there could be mixed results coming from it. And what we found is that it's really important to include specific criteria that you can manipulate to meet the needs of your specific students. And this webinar will help you do that, but that this is based off of Jaeger and Dweck's initial intervention. So this is pulled from the intervention that we created after our experiment. We combined the two online modules that were the growth mindset, and we incorporated into a classroom presentation of an hour and 20 minutes. And so this is, I'm not going to show you the whole presentation. I don't have enough time here today, but we can offer you the intervention. You could use it and change it to meet your needs. But the idea is that the intervention needs to be focused on 4 different aspects. The first part is that it's rooted in neuroscience. The saying that Jaeger really wants students to leave with is that your brain is like a muscle. And the more you use it, the stronger it gets. The more you use it, the smarter you get. And so we really incorporate findings coming from neuroplasticity and looking at the fact that, your brain continues to be able to change and reconnect in really interesting ways throughout our entire lifespan. And because that occurs, well, that means that, what we like, what we can do can change as well, because our brain is constantly changing. So that's a really big part of it. The second part is to introduce to our students that doing difficult challenges can make our brain smarter. And so it's like, what are the different types of tasks that now students can do to achieve this? Often it involves reframing what hard things mean in a classroom. Often we avoid difficult things, and now it's like, well, actually, doing that difficult assignment is going to make me stronger and smarter. Even if I'm maybe not going to ever be a mathematician, it's going to have a benefit on my entire brain functioning. The third part that is really important is that we give them the strategies required. It's not about working harder or repeating the same thing over and over again. It's about being able to effectively use different resources at our disposal to achieve different results. And so we spend a module talking about those different strategies. And then the fourth part is my favorite part when delivering the intervention, is trying to really show students that people who have high levels of success in their life, they also believe in a growth mindset. So we pull from different celebrities, and we were targeting classes QM, macro, and math. So we pulled from our teachers from those classes that we believed really showcase a growth mindset. And we wanted to show those students in the intervention that, look, it's not just about your mindset. Your teachers also have a growth mindset. And we asked them, what do you need to be successful in the classroom? And they gave their growth mindset answers. And so that's also delivered in the intervention. So I just pulled a few slides that will look at these different modules quickly. So here is like talking about the brain. I'm going to click on this video. Here you're showing neurons connect with each other in real time. And so the idea is that the more we practice and exercise in exercises, our connections in our brain get stronger. They're created, and then we can strengthen them. And this is really neuroplasticity. And so we present a few studies regarding the ability of our brain to keep on changing itself. We have found that depending on our audience, we started off with social science students. So we presented different neuroscience findings to demonstrate neuroplasticity. But if you're going to a science classroom, it may be better to provide different types of studies. So it's really, you want to make sure that your audience will be interested in the neuroscience that you're giving. I went to another college during Brain Awareness Week, and I really beefed up the neuroscience findings there. So just to remember that your audience will have an interest in the brain, and it varies of their understanding. So to kind of meet those needs of your audience. So we present a study. Here it's a study where adults were learning how to read later on in life. So they were in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. And I asked students, like, did you think that this would be an easy thing to do? Do you think they were able to do it? And often they'll say this must have been very difficult. And so, well, these researchers, they wanted to see whether they would be able to acquire this ability later on in life, but they also looked at brain differences to see whether their brain had changed as a result of learning. So in the next slide, I show them the areas of the brain that were now different after these adults had learned how to read. Again, really demonstrating that the brain retains its ability to learn new skills and to change, and that because you could do anything at any point, right? Then not anything, but within reason, that what you could do today could be different tomorrow. Not only what you can do in terms of your abilities, but your preferences and your likes can also change based on this idea of this neuroplasticity. And so this slide is taken about how to help students adopt a growth mindset. We've been conducting focus groups after the intervention, and we've decided we're going to really add more studies to demonstrate these techniques. It seems that our students wanted a little bit more information here. But the idea here, we just give simple ways to adopt a growth mindset. One that works really well is just simply adding the word yet at the end of the sentence. So I'm always not correcting, but I'm always changing the sentence of my family, of my students. I'm whenever they say, I can't do this, I don't know how to do this, always with the word yet after. And what research shows is that just adding this simple 3 letters kind of changes the way we perceive the task and our own abilities. It kind of elicits a growth mindset. Talking to yourself is also a very important technique. So this intervention kind of brings a little bit of self-awareness. Many students have never heard about these mindsets, and so they don't know that they're using a fixed mindset in their math class. And so this technique of just becoming more aware, and when you see yourself going into a fixed mindset, just clearly stating, like, stop, this is fixed, I could choose differently. And so that's also why it becomes important to have a discussion about what are our triggers for a fixed mindset. And then motivation. So use the you statement when you're getting yourself, hyped up about a project or a presentation. Like, I got this. Like, no, you got this. You could do it. We can do it. And we're going to go into more detail about how, as a teacher, you can implement these strategies when it comes to more specific tasks like evaluations. Here we have like the last part of the module where we're trying to get people to realize that people we may have thought of as super talented, that were always as amazing as they are today, they have a growth mindset. So I'm going to just let John Legend talk about. So John Legend is an American singer, songwriter, musician, and actor. He's actually won the EGOT, so the Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony. It's a very small club. He is a part of excellence here, and he's talking about his mindset. And so we have a few other examples of celebrities, and again, our teachers. And then this is a really important aspect for your intervention to be as effective as possible, is that you have to engage the student within the intervention. So this presentation is accompanied by a worksheet. And at many moments during the presentation, we stop and I say, okay, now it's your turn. Can you write down in your worksheet a problem that you have in the classroom that you find you'll never, you're a challenge that you're meeting, and then what are the strategies that you use to overcome these challenges? There's it's 6 or 7 different questions that are accompanied that we can also provide you, of course, but are accompanied with the intervention because we really want the student to engage in this process. This is again a principle that Jaeger and Dweck has found to be really important when ensuring that this is a successful intervention. So here we're just showing you simply at the end of the intervention, we're asked the students now, help us explain this to other students who are going to be starting next year, who may be struggling. What can you tell them to help them have a growth mindset?
So now we're back to our research results. So just a quick reminder. So remember, there's 3 times points. So at the first time point, student, we're just filling out some scales about like their growth mindset, sociodemographics, other school-related items that I showed you the results with the correlation earlier. And then they did the intervention. So the results I'm presenting you now is the study that we did online. So not given in class, which we've done too, but the results I will show you, just to be clear, they're related to the study we did online where the module was provided through Moodle, which we can share with you. We'll talk about it later. So students could do it at any time, but it was basically what we just did with you now a little bit. So they just were some slides, and instead of doing a worksheet, in the slides, they go through the slides, they read, they watch video, and then there would be some prompts and answer some questions. So it was still interactive, but it was done online. So now I'm bringing you to time 2. They've done the first half. So then what happened? So at the end of time 2, so they've done half of the intervention, we wanted to already start testing if the intervention is effective. So one of the things that's really important, and John Legend talked about it, is being willing to learn, yes, but do hard things like Julie mentioned. So one of the measures that we have that we borrowed from Dweck and Jaeger is asking students to imagine that during the week, you're working on an exercise for your macro MQM or mathematic course. At the end of this exercise, you have the opportunity to choose which question from 2 options you would like to do. In bold here, very important, you'll get the same number of points for trying either question, even if you're given the wrong answer. If you had to choose now, which one would you choose? So remember, after having done the intervention, they get to pick. So do they pick the question that's an easy review? It reviews topics already covered in class, and you'll probably get through it without having to think much. Or they pick the question that is a tough challenge. It requires you to apply your knowledge from the course in a new way, and you'll probably get it wrong, but you might learn something new through it. So as a teacher, we all hope that our students would pick the tough challenge, right? You get the same number of points. What did you learn with the intervention? You learned that with doing hard things, you're going to learn more. Let's see the results. Drum roll. What? So let's look at this. Okay, so this is a contingency table. My QM teachers there, that's a good one. So I kind of highlighted some things for you just so you can compare. So as you see, it was randomly assigned. Students were randomly assigned to either be in the control condition where they just learn about the brain. They didn't learn about neuroplasticity, they just learn about brain parts and neurons. In the treatment condition, that's the students that were given the intervention that we borrowed from Jaeger. And as you can see here, it is significant. What does that mean? So people in the control condition, so out of those in the controlled condition, 34% of them chose the hard question. A bit disheartening. But people in the treatment condition that they had just been through the first part of the intervention were slightly more likely to pick the hard question. It's a significant difference. Still not the majority of students, but we had some discussion that perhaps they thought the harder question required more effort. But even then, that's kind of part of what the growth mindset is. So looking at this, maybe you're like, oh, but wait a minute, next slide. Something that's really important about this intervention, and it's not just us saying it, but other researchers saying this, is that this intervention obviously is meant to be most relevant to students who are having difficulties, or maybe you want to call them low performing or low achieving. So they're having difficulties at school. Otherwise, I mean, obviously there's a ceiling effect, and you saw the continuum of the growth mindset. So people who already have a growth mindset, maybe the intervention doesn't impact them so much. So this is why here, those contingency table that you see, I've divided students based on their self-reported grade. So at time one of the item was asking student, what kind of grade do you usually get? And mostly 90s, mostly 80s, mostly 70s. Are you in the 60-50 zone? So if you look at the results here, the students who self-describe as being achieving student, they mostly get in the 90s. The chi-square is no longer significant. It kind of makes sense. So for them, they kind of know that they should already do hard things. So it didn't make a difference whether they were in the control condition or treatment condition. They, again, if you look at the number, it's not like a majority of them decided to do the hard question, but you know, like a good portion of them. But if you look, and this is the one I want you to look, the students who are having difficulties that are usually getting in the 60s and 50s, look at the number. Those in the control condition, only 9% of them would have picked the hard question. 9%. This is what you have to do at school. You have to do hard things. But look at what happened for those students who were in the treatment condition. So they had just received the intervention about growth mindset. We bring them to the same level as the high achieving students. Now, 52% of those students pick the hard question. To me, that's a success. Not the majority. And again, like we can talk later about this as to why not everybody's picking the hard question, really, because you get the same amount of points. We don't have time for this, but we can talk about it later. Okay, so ooh, this is all yellow. So next step is talking about the context. So obviously, and Julie will talk about this a little bit more later, but I have a few studies I want to show you, but we're running out of time, but that's okay. So basically, school context matters. So even if you personally have a growth mindset, but the school is very fixed, or your peers are very fixed, it's impossible for us to assume that this intervention will work if it's not supported by the context. And there's a great book by Mary Murphy, who's a student of Carol Dweck and has been expanding on that research to show that context matters. So basically, you want to have peers and teachers that help you with your own growth belief, and she calls it the cultures of growth that basically help support that intervention. And I will go through a few slides. They're really busy, but I just want you to know that there are evidence for this. Okay, so there's a research here that shows that teachers who have growth beliefs is related to their own students having growth belief. It sounds maybe evident, but there's data to show this, that teachers who have growth belief are more likely to then help their own students adopt growth belief. Another study here shows that, again, it's important for a teacher not only about their own belief, but it's also important that they support that in their own class. So they can give an intervention, but there are also different ways that they can support their students' growth belief with the way they reframe exercise, or they give feedback. So it's important to, yes, equip the students, but the context also is important. And I think it works best when the teacher themselves give the intervention.
Okay, and so now we want to now go more with the tools that maybe you could use yourself in your own classroom with your own circumstances, other than just giving the growth mindset intervention itself. But it's very important that we just talk about something that sometimes is mentioned, is that we want with this mindset intervention not to over-responsibilize the student. So the idea is that each student is working within a system where they have access to certain number of resources, but not all students, we know that not all students have the same access to all resources. And so we don't want to just really highlight, well, just work harder and you'll do it. And the student who may be having problems in the classroom, not fitting in, not feeling like they belong, if we just told them, just work harder, well, we're not doing them any service, and we're maybe even adding to their anxiety levels. So we want to make sure we don't over responsibilize the individual mindset. It's also really important that we don't just say work harder for all of our students. I often give examples of sometimes applying a growth mindset is maybe giving up in one task, or seeking different types of help that you normally wouldn't have gone for. But the idea is to understand what resources are available to our students and how they can access it in order for this intervention to be beneficial. It's also that adopting a growth mindset works best in times of difficulty and transition. So the students that are struggling, this mindset can be very helpful for them. So we're targeting students who may be failing, and the growth, maybe if they can adopt a growth mindset, well, instead of dropping out of the class, which we often see early on in the semester, they may stay long enough in the classroom to be able to get the resources that they need to get to that 60. It's also very important to understand that we can have a growth mindset in one area, but not in another. Often when I'm discussing mindsets with students, I see that maybe I have a student athlete who really adopts a growth mindset in their athletic area, but not in the classroom setting. And so it's possible to have both types of mindsets in our life. And so there is a worksheet that you'll see at the end of the webinar, but just how to communicate that students are in a growth mindset classroom. And a lot of it has to do with creating a safe environment for our students to make mistakes in. And so, for example, when you're trying to communicate a learning goal, whether it's in our, in our classroom, if it's in our team meetings, we could say things like, "We are in the learning zone today. I actually expect you to make a lot of mistakes." Try to give them permission and really highlight that this is an opportunity. This is what we're trying to achieve today. Take more risks. This is a very challenging task. I want you to try, even if you don't think you'll get it right. I'm not looking for the right answers. I'm looking for risk taking. So verbalize the growth mindset. But for example, if you're working with a student who is struggling despite their strong effort that they're putting in, you could say something like, "Let's look at this as an opportunity to learn," or "You're not there yet. What strategies, what resources can we incorporate to get you there?" When you see a student that is making progress, I think it's really beneficial when you could say something like, "Look at how much progress you've made so far. Do you remember how difficult this was when you first started?" So really highlighting and emphasizing the journey that they've been on. From Mary Murphy's work, she really talks about fixing growth as a culture of genius and a culture of growth. And then how to implement a culture of growth, I'll just say offering a lot of learning opportunities, emphasizing motivation and a strong work ethic, focusing on the process, not only the results. We want to foster a love of learning when we're creating a culture of growth. And so, in particular, when we are putting our students in an evaluation context, what can we do as teachers to cultivate a growth mindset? So set the context. So just like from that worksheet, this is often a challenging task for people, but this is a great learning opportunity. I like to highlight that at the beginning of my classes where we're really tackling challenging course material. We also can talk about put a focus on growth. So implement a thorns and roses strategy, also known as a rosebud thorn exercise. So have students identify what their thorny issues could be, and reframe those issues, those challenges, as opportunities to learn and grow. It's also really important to allow students to have a support system. So let's create a community in the classroom. And let's also highlight the very important communities that our colleges offer, like peer tutoring services. Which subjects are there tutoring available for? The writing centers. So really identify all of the support that's available for our students, and then talk about normalizing getting help from these resources. Model the growth mindset yourself. Be open to your students' feedback. Encourage self-assessment. Let them assess their own progress and work. So, for example, you could say, what part of this do you think you did well on? What's one thing you could do differently on the next time? How can we break this goal into smaller, manageable steps? So, getting their feedback. Also use constructive, actionable feedback. This is really important. The type of feedback is right. We're providing triggers for fixed mindset with our feedback. And so you want to have evaluations that are low stake evaluations, where we're actually telling our students it's okay to make mistakes. It's not going to cost you your whole semester grade, right? So being able to provide this low stake evaluation is really important, and making sure that the feedback you're providing them is constructive. So, for example, next time, try organizing your ideas more clearly, or you're very close. Try this to get closer to the to your goal. Encourage a positive and resilient response to mistakes. We often avoid mistakes at all costs. Not in the classroom. This is the place to make mistakes, and that actually, even when you're outside of the classroom, we make tons of mistakes too. So just normalize that discussion.
So I'm going to briefly mention some practical tools we can share with you. And one thing I want to mention before getting to that is the importance of low stakes. Julie mentioned it, but I just had a discussion recently with the students about the growth mindset intervention, and they told me that, well, yeah, you want me to have a growth mindset, but there's a midterm and a final, so there's no place for me to make mistakes. They weren't saying that about my class, but just generally, they have this impression that at university it's like this: a midterm, a final, and an essay, so there's no room to make mistakes. So then how dare you like tell me it's okay to make mistakes? So this is the idea of, again, there's the intervention, yes, but the intervention alone is not going to work if the system doesn't change a little bit, or at least how we set up our classes, giving feedback, having low stakes. So to give the place for students to make mistakes and not be punished for it, but being rewarded for it. So here are the tools that we suggest that you can use, and remember, tweak it for your own population. So there's really three things you see on the slides here. There's that online self-training that we use for the interventional study. The results you saw were based on this. So basically it's an H5P file that we can share with you that you can then upload to your Moodle. So we can share that. You'll be able to modify it. And just to be quickly, we actually contacted Jaeger, and Jaeger had shared with us is material to be able to use. So it's actually like, it's normal that you tweak it. So you can borrow ours because we already tweak it for CEGEP level. The other one that we can share, a PowerPoint presentation. Julie has been giving this with great success in MTI, which seems to be a perfect fit in terms of this course methods in the social science. So we can share the PowerPoint with you along with the worksheets. This is a worksheet that students fill out in class. And there's a web link here for a worksheet on how to provide feedback or reframing. So there's a link there. And this is just, I just copy pasted the different headings so you can actually see what's inside that document. They're basically just tool of like what to say when you give an assignment, what to say if a student is struggling, just ideas. I mean, again, you're going to tweak it, but even me, sometimes I ask Julie, like, what do I say? And then like, it just helps to have like examples that have been vetted by Jaeger and Dweck team as being good reframe when you talk to students. Again, one last three recommendation. So an interview with Jaeger. So Jaeger is the one who is the first author on that Nature paper. It's an experiment with that intervention that has a nationally representative samples. It's very impressive with thousands of students. So an interview with him, you can listen to it. It's great. Also a podcast. And he just recently published a book. It came out this summer. And I mean, this is the age range that interests us. So 10 to 25, the science of motivating young people. So this is actually a great read that we recommend. And we thank AccuPC for having us. Woo, we're just 3 minutes. Julie, yeah.
Thank you so much, Julie and Julie, for sharing this very inspiring practice, but also the theoretical underpinnings and some very convincing findings, examples, lots of materials for us to read through in the upcoming days and weeks. So we're stopping the recording at the moment, and that means that we will be activating everybody's cameras cameras and microphones. So if you have any questions for our presenters, of course, you can share them in writing using the Q&A module. But if you so wish, then we invite you to activate your microphone and ask your question verbally to get the conversation going.